Mage! Yes, indeed, that classical single-target DPS monster that was the Arcane Mage. How is it doing, Mr. Pandaria? Are you guys wanting to try this spec out? Well, let me guide you through it. Okay, the Arcane Mage is an interesting take on the rest of the Mage specs, in which it tries to borrow a couple of bits from, say, Frost and stuff, but it simplifies down the micromanagement, and it sort of rips away any dot aspects, any damage over time. We don't have that. We have straight-up, hard-hitting, kick-you-in-the-face spells, and that's what it's all about. So let's take a quick look at what we've got here. Arcane Mage's main nuke is the Arcane Blast. Now, the Arcane Blast is going to give you damage based on your mana, okay? It's based on your mana, and it also gives you something called an Arcane Charge. Watch, here we go. Arcane Blast, boom, Arcane Charge. There it is. Increase the damage of Arcane Blast, Arcane Missiles, and Arcane Barrage by 20%. Now, this bad boy stacks up to 6, as you can see as I spam my Arcane Blast. However, the more charges we have, it does increase the mana cost of Arcane Blast by 375%. So, we get Arcane Barrage, which will dump our Arcane Charges. You see, they're all gone. And we also get Arcane Missiles, which is this shiny line here, which is a wonderful proc, which also generates us Arcane Charges. So we have two ways of generating these Arcane Charges. That's via Arcane Blast and Arcane Missiles. Arcane Explosion will also have a chance to generate them as well. And our dump is Arcane Barrage, no longer just one-shotting people randomly in BGs. Let's look at the talents that go alongside this before we get into the reforging and the style of play. Your first one is something to do while you're on the move. Now, Arcane hates moving, detests it, disgusting, don't like it, don't want to do it. Arcane is based around standing still and driving a sledgehammer into the enemy. That is how Arcane works, that's how it wants to be. Presence of Mind is pretty much the default choice. Scorch is just not viable for a couple of reasons. Presence of Mind, when activated, your next mage spell with a casting time less than 10 seconds becomes an instant cast spell. The reason this is more default is it instantly gives us an Arcane Blast, which gets us our charges faster, so on and so forth. It's very, very cool. Your next one is some sort of defensive cooldown. Pick whichever you prefer, my friends. Ice Barrier tends to be the default choice as well. It's fucking awesome, okay? 106,000 Absorb Shield. Very, very nice. Don't lose spellcasting while being damaged. All that kind of good stuff. Everything comes from Ice Barrier, especially in a raid environment. You're going to have a good time. Temporal Shield has its uses as well. Situational. Blazing Speed tends not to be favoured over Ice Barrier and Presence of Mind. Generally just because you have Blink. And in a PvE setting, Blink tends to be just the best thing ever invented. At level 45, you got your CC abilities. Frostjaw is awesome sometimes, but mainly Ring of Frost is going to be the winner. Mass amounts of CC, on-demand saviour. I've saved several groups today with the various mage specs via Ring of Frost, saving their asses left and right when tanks ignore a big pack of mobs. All that kind of stuff. Ring of Frost tends to be the big winner there. At level 60, again, a defensive save your ass ability. Now, Cold Snap, I chose that just to play around with it, but Cold Snap essentially just gives you the option of resetting your Ice Block. That is its main use in a PvE environment. So we Ice Block some Mega ability, we break Ice Block, then we can Cold Snap and get it back. But be aware, you will still suffer from hypothermia, so you have a 30-second chance, 30-second wait before you can do that other Ice Block. Greater invisibility is situational as well, but it's brilliant when it comes to that situation. Damage taken is reduced by 90% while invisible and 3 seconds after coming out of invisibility. 90% damage reduction makes you a very good option to soak things. Cauterize as well. If it's that passive thing, you might die, you're not sure. It could happen at any moment, any time. If that boss is not requiring you to soak something or use double ice blocks, pick Cauterize. Should something terrible happen, you're not going to die, and it gives your healers a chance to rescue your ass. Your level 75 ability is your Bomb. Now, they all do pretty much the same DPS. I will say I prefer Frost Bomb, okay? I much prefer Frost Bomb for the simple reason that Frost Bomb has a 1.42 second cast. However, it has a 10-second cooldown and yields pretty much the same DPS as Living Bomb and so on. The reason for that is it times quite nicely when I Frost Bomb things in order to continue my DPS and build up my Arcane charges. While Frost Bomb is on cooldown, I can almost essentially get back to 6 charges within that period and then recast my Frost Bomb. I found it much more useful while I'm casting my other spells to use Frost Bomb. But again, personal preference, DPS yield is pretty much the same. Living Bomb and Frost Bomb tend to be preferred for some AoE situations. Now, Your level 90 abilities are pretty much only Rune of Power. Rune of Power is the default choice for the Arcane Mage for a simple reason. Invocation reduces the cooldown of Evocation, but passively regenerates 50% less mana. This spec is entirely based on how much mana you have, and I'm going to get that to in the rotation. As such, generating less mana is pretty shitty. We don't want that at all. Rune of Power, however, while standing in your own Rune of Power, your mana regeneration is increased by 100% and your spell damage is increased by 15%. This extra mana regen is what it's all about, okay? That is where your big damage is coming from, is based on your mana. So it's more important, vastly more important, to be keeping stood in your Rune of Power and getting the benefit of that mana. Yes, it gives you the 15% damage increase, but it's literally the mana that is more and more important. It really does. It does replace Revocation, so note that. Incanter's Ward, not much to say. It's situational. It's not going to be useful all the time. If you're an Arcane Mage, Rune of Power is pretty much the way to go, my friends. Now, your glyphs. Your glyphs are not awesome. I'm sorry to say that. Your glyph is not awesome. Big note out to Fire Blast. If you are using Living Bomb, you will need this in order to spread that Living Bomb. It is also quite nice to detonate Frost Bombs and stuff like that. I will say Glyph of Arcane Explosion, increasing the radius, is always nice if you're doing mass AoE. Arcane Power increases the duration and cooldown of Arcane Power by 100% is also pretty nice because it lines up nicely with all your DPS cooldowns. The better players will be rolling with that Arcane Power, okay? You will be rolling with that. It's very nice, pretty damn cool. So glyphs, not much to mention there, guys. You're not going to get much benefit PvE-wise from your glyphs, which is what it's intended to be. So about your reforging, it's all about mastery, okay? So we should talk about your mastery. While I do that, I'm going to bring this up. Your mastery increases the damage you do while you have X amount of mana, okay? It's based on a percentage of your mana. So let's find that mastery. It is Mana Adept. Increase all spell damage done by up to 39% based on the amount of mana the mage has unspent. So I talked earlier about how important mana is to this spec, and it is really important, okay? You do more damage while you have more mana, which is why you want the mana regen that comes from here. Now, the counter to that is, of course, Arcane Blast increases the mana cost of your spell, so you start losing mana. So if I get myself to 6 charges pretty quickly, even while stood inside this, you can see I'm going to start losing more and more mana. At 6 charges, it's 750% increase on my mana cost. So you can see my mana is working down pretty damn quickly. And you can also note that my damage is reducing accordingly. 83k. Oh, there's a crit, that's not going to help him. 68k, and so on and so forth. You can see my damage is actually dropping quite rapidly because I am using so much more mana, and my mana is nowhere near full. So it's all based entirely about how much mana you have. This means that you need to be gemming much straight into Mastery and reforging immediately into Mastery. This also means you'll be using Mage Armor, which is a flat 3,000 Mastery increase. So all the way through here, you're going to see crit to Mastery, Mastery. You want as much Mastery as you can possibly get, but your priority is always hit chance. A missed spell as Arcane is torturous. It can be something like a 300k crit. You're going to start seeing those pretty often as an Arcane Mage. Missing that is a lot of wasted damage. Other than that, get as much Mastery as possible and then get some haste, okay? Crit is your worst stat. You're going for consistent, constant, painful assaults on the mind and the body via your Mastery. You're going to be gemming as such as well. This character is gemmed for fire at the moment, so do not copy this gem. Look at the gem guide I've put on the right hand side. All about the Mastery, guys. Get your hits up, get your Mastery up. Very important. Now, rotation wise, the Arcane Mage is still suffering. It suffered in Cataclysm from a lack of stuff to do, essentially, and it still suffers a little bit from that. They've modified a couple of spells, such as Arcane Barrage now carries a cleave with it. Let me read that for you. Arcane Barrage damage is increased, and it also splits off onto enemy targets, causing depending on how many charges you have. So if I come over to here and build up some Arcane charges, let me get a couple of Arcane Blasts going. Arcane Blast 1, 2, 3. Now what you're going to notice when I fire off my Arcane Barrage is it splits off. You can see it hits 3 targets as well, so doing 300k damage. So you gained a passive cleave from your Arcane Barrage. But other than that, your rotation is going to be pretty simple. Get your Rune of Power down. Be in it as much as possible. Now you can have 2 down, so think about that placement-wise. Your next mission is literally to get as many arcane charges as possible in the most efficient way. Now, Arcane Blast straight up hits hard, but it also costs you mana as soon as it goes off. Your proc will be this, Arcane Missiles. Now, the good thing about Arcane Missiles is it allows you to regenerate mana while it's channeling. So you can see I got straight back up there, and it gives you charges of Arcane. It gives you more Arcane charges, and then allows you to dump them with Arcane Barrage. This allows you to keep a nice amount of mana all the time. You're going to be pretty much close to 100%. There is some technical use of Arcane Missiles, but realistically speaking, you want to use them as soon as possible and then dump them, because you want to be regenerating as much mana as possible. Your main goal is to get to 6 charges of Arcane Charge as quickly as possible while maintaining around 80% mana, and you're going to be in good shape doing that, okay? Note when your Rune of Power starts flickering, it means it's going to run out. Replace it, because it's not only the damage increase, it's the mana regen increase that you're interested in, okay? That's what you're mainly after. Your big DPS cooldown is going to be Arcane Power and Presence of Mind. While under the effects of Arcane Power, you still want to be using Arcane Missiles. It's not the old style where you burn all your mana. It's very important that you keep your mana high. Okay, you need to keep your mana high. So you're going to be dumping as normal. You're going to be using things like Arcane Missiles while under the effects of Arcane Power, as it allows your mana to regen. This is one of the only specs that's going to be using mana gems. After your Arcane Power is expired, you're likely to be rolling around 80-70% mana. Use a mana gem, get yourself back up to 100% mana as quickly as possible, okay? Very important that you do that. Keep your mana high. Simple goals, guys. Simple goals. Get to 6 charges of arcane charges as quickly as possible, and keep your mana high. That's all you need to do, and you'll be in good shape. The other aspect, of course, is to keep your bomb on cooldown. Keep your bomb on cooldown. I still recommend Frost Bomb, as you can do everything else in between and still have good shape and be in good form. When it comes to AoE, if it's 3 or 4 mobs, 5 or 6 mobs, do your single target rotation. Arcane is based around being a single target, nuke the crap out of everything spec, okay? You just want to be nuking a target. The passive cleave from Arcane Barrage on 5 or 6 mobs is going to be more than enough to make your AoE viable. Sad as it is, that's the way it rolls. When it comes to a lot of mobs, it's back to the old school mage style. Get that Flame Strike down and keep your Frost Bomb on cooldown and Arcane Explosion. Do note though, your Arcane Explosion benefits from Arcane Charges, and it can rebuild. So try and get a good stack of Arcane Charges, and also, if you can, get yourself a nice place with the Rune of Power where you can do that. Now you'll notice Arcane Explosion actually refreshes Arcane Charges and has a chance of generating Arcane Charges. Not that it's going to do it now. There you go, 5. You see, it has a chance to do it. So I'm up to 6. I'm doing as much as I can. And keep your Flame Strike on cooldown and your Frost Bomb. Very easy to AoE as an Arcane Mage, okay? You're not going to struggle with this spec once you simplify your goals. Don't worry about mana control. It will happen passively. If you're studying your Rune of Power and you're looking after yourself and you've got your mana gems ready, you'll be more than fine to stay at 80% mana for the majority of any dungeon. Just be aware that if it's a dungeon that's going very, very fast, Arcane is going to suffer because you can't keep a Rune of Power down all the time. Alright, ballers, that's your Arcane Mage. Let's jump into some gameplay and see how it rolls out. Alright, ballers, bye.